Okay, awesome. So I just started the recording. So if anyone wants to, if any of the participants plan to speak or ask questions during the session, just bear in mind that it will be recorded and we'll be sending it out to the rest of our community who might want to learn about things in the session and take action. But just to introduce the session, hello everyone. My name is Tan from Sibiu, and if you're new to Kumi now, I'll send a few links to our website. This is Sabil's program where we invite speakers every week to discuss a specific issue concerning Palestine, Israel, and take action. Today, we're really honored to be hearing from Amin, and we have Aviv and Tess with us today to speak about the E1 plan, about settlement expansion, and hear some updates regarding that. So just to introduce the speakers, Tess Miller is the International Public Outreach Coordinator, if that's the correct title. But Tess is here today to speak. Aviv as well is a researcher for Iramim since 2012. And through his work, he has gained expertise on Israeli policies in East Jerusalem. So he'll be presenting on some of these recent plans today, how we can take action, and kind of give us a lot of the tools to understand what's going on. So again, thank you to you both for taking the time today to speak to us. So how the format will go is Tess will speak first, Aviv will give the presentation, and then maybe we can have about 10 to 15 minutes of questions, and then any additional time left. If they have actions for us, we will try to do some of the advocacy, but we'll try to devote some time to action if we have any remaining time today. So yeah, thank you again for coming. I'll make sure to just give Aviv, first of all, permission. Okay, awesome. And you guys can begin whenever, but thank you again.
Thank you so much, Tan. It's really a pleasure to be here, and we're very honored to be invited. So I will just start quickly by briefly introducing Iramim for those of you not familiar with our work, and who we are and what we do in Jerusalem. And then, as Tan said, I will pass the stage over to Aviv, who will speak about the issue at hand, which is annexation and E1. Okay, so what is Iramim? So we are an Israeli NGO. I say Israeli because we are registered in Israel as an NGO, but our staff has both Jewish Israelis as well as Palestinians. And we focus on policy issues in East Jerusalem. All of our work is geared toward a stable and just future city where both Israelis and Palestinians can live together in dignity and in security. Our work centers on three main areas. So public education, policy advocacy, and research and monitoring. Through public education, we aim to reshape discourse around Jerusalem, both within the Israeli society as well as abroad. We lead on the ground geopolitical tours that expose participants to key issues facing Palestinian residents of Jerusalem. So residency status, home demolitions, as well as state-backed dispossession of land and property. Some recent tours we have done for international audiences have included a tour of E1 for on-the-ground activists. So this includes participants from the the EAPPI program, for those of you who are familiar with them, as well as a tour of Silwan for various European church leaders. We really welcome every opportunity to share our knowledge for anyone visiting the region who shares our vision of a just future for the city, for all of its inhabitants. So if anyone is in the land and is interested in a tour, please reach out to us. In addition, our research team produces in-depth reports and analyses on key issues such as education, East Jerusalem, the current struggle in Sheikh Jarrah, violations of the status quo on Al-Aqsa Mosque, to name just a few reports we have just produced, recent reports we have produced. All of this material is available on our website. I encourage you to explore them. For those of you here who are engaged in advocacy, we're really happy to serve as a resource and support your efforts in any way. So please, if you have questions about any of our material, please, you can reach out to us directly. In terms of advocacy, we see geopolitical work as inseparable from the issue of the ongoing human rights violations happening now. Our mission is twofold. It's to preserve the on-the-ground conditions that are necessary for a political solution, while also addressing the injustices which are being perpetuated today under the current political reality. Our local advocacy efforts focuses on principal litigation, which essentially means challenging the state bodies that protect and sustain this current unjust system. Aviv can probably speak more about this if he has time in his portion of the program. Within all of this, it's really essential for us to work alongside Palestinian communities. We really believe in cooperation and solidarity, not being the public face of someone else's struggle. And again, Aviv, who is one of our most active researchers, can share more about this if he has time. So to this end, we're really grateful to be invited here by Sabeel, and we really are honored to contribute to this very important program. In terms of international advocacy, unfortunately, we live in a time where, despite our efforts, we find that many options for local advocacy are quite exhausted due to many reasons. So this is why it is more crucial than ever for us to be in contact with the international community, like many of you who perhaps have some more influence from outside the land. So we are very grateful to be here tonight, again, to share our message and hopefully to be a resource for this community. So with that, I'll hand this virtual floor over to Aviv, who can introduce himself and expand on the issue of E1, annexation, and all of his important work. So
hi, good evening, everyone. And thank you, Tess, thank you, Tan and Sabeel, for the invitation. Our issue today is Israeli steps towards annexation in the West Bank, and specifically E1. As Tess explained, here, Amin, our organization works in Jerusalem, and this is relevant for possible annexation steps for two reasons. One is that the Israeli strategy may be to start and expand annexation around Jerusalem. So, of course, very relevant to the city. And two, because right after 1967, with the occupation of the West Bank, Israel has already annexed what we call today East Jerusalem. So if we want to understand what can be the consequences of more annexation, maybe we can learn from the situation of Jerusalem. And the reason why annexation is an issue at this time, this period, this government, is twofold. One, people in the government are speaking about it, are posing it as a goal for this government, as something that is will happen soon. There have been, over the past 2 years, several moves at legislation towards annexation. One of them just 2 days ago on Sunday. So far, these steps have not turned into full formal legislation of annexation, but it shows us that this is serious. And the other reason is that aside from a formal decision, either through legislation or a government decision and so on, Israel has always used steps on the ground to create a reality, to create a de facto reality, which often is, of course, much stronger than words on a paper or just the laws in the abstract laws in themselves. And this is also happening throughout the West Bank, and specifically very close to Jerusalem at one of what has become over the last few decades like a point of contention, a hotspot by the name of E1. which after quite a few, 2-3 decades, that Israeli governments were not allowed, and I stress not allowed, so someone, the international community, prevented Israeli governments from going ahead with this project, which is called the E1. Actually, last month, it was approved by the Israeli authorities, allowing it to materialize maybe soon. And E1, which I need to explain about it, has become like one of the major de facto annexation steps, and maybe synonymous with solidifying the Israeli control, the Israeli apartheid between the river and the sea, with a prevention certainly of an independent Palestinian state, but of maybe any resolution of the current situation. So what is E1? Maybe I will try to share the screen now so we can see the geography. So are you seeing the map here on the screen? Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. So this map is a map that we use. We designed it and we use it often in our work. The reason why there's so many colors and lines here, it's because they all each thing on the map, of course, shows something in Jerusalem, and it's complicated. So there's many things on the map. I'll try to zoom in a little bit. Yeah. So without going into all the details, the line in green that you see here in the middle of the map is actually called the Green Line. That was the border between Israel and Jordan between 1949 and 1967. And basically the border, yeah, of the state of Israel and of Jerusalem at that time. So West Jerusalem here, since 1948, the capital of Israel. Then in 1967, in the war, Israel captures and occupies huge territories, and specifically the West Bank. And very quickly after the war, like in June 1967, the Israeli government takes two steps. One, it redraws the boundary of Jerusalem, and the boundary of Jerusalem today is the blue line that we see here in West Jerusalem, inside the state of Israel. Maybe not much has changed, but also the blue line goes beyond the green line, so into the West Bank, into occupied territory. Okay. Okay, now we can see more of it. It goes here. Okay. That was one step. So Israel expanded Jerusalem as a municipality. And the second this Israeli decision was that the Israeli law upholds in the whole of Jerusalem. Okay, so for those of us who know, the West Bank being occupied by Israel is governed by a military law under international humanitarian law and the rules of occupation, military occupation, and so on. According to the international community or by international law, this should hold for the whole of the West Bank, okay, including what we call today East Jerusalem. But those two Israeli government decisions basically mean that in East Jerusalem, the sovereign is not the Israeli army, temporary sovereign, but actually Israeli civilian authorities like the Jerusalem municipality or different ministries. And the law is not the military law, but the Israeli law. This move has not been recognized by the international community until today. All these steps are illegal and they are supposed to be undone. And now we come to E1. So according to Israel, again, the blue line, this is the eastern boundary of Jerusalem and of the state of Israel. So E1 is just outside of it, in the West Bank. Those of us who know the terms the West Bank has been divided in the Oslo Accords into three areas: Area A, Area B, Area C. E1 is in Area C, which is basically where all the authorities are under are Israeli authorities. So the Palestinian Authority has authorities in areas A and B, but not in Area C. Okay, and here we see this light blue patch. Okay, with the name E1, it's a name that Israel gave it. Okay, it's not that this is some entity that exists or existed prior to an Israeli decision. Israel drew a shape on the map and called it E1. Today, it is a relatively open space, okay, with several small Bedouin communities living in it, but for the most part, it is open, it is unbuilt, and yeah, and it is on the one hand in between Palestinian municipalities. So of course it is adjacent to Jerusalem. It is adjacent to East Jerusalem, which of course even today, after 57 years of Israeli annexation, is predominantly Palestinian. So what we see here, the brown patches, are Palestinian neighborhoods in Jerusalem, like Atur, like Issawiya, and so on. And it is also very close to Palestinian municipalities in the West Bank, like Anata, Azaim, Azariah, and so on. Okay, basically all these different Palestinian spaces, either neighborhoods in Jerusalem or municipalities in the West Bank, we can think of them, or they truly are, the Palestinian metropole of Jerusalem. Okay, it depends how you look at it, but it's roughly 500,000 Palestinians are living there. On the other hand, looking at it, I don't know, from east to west, here in the east is Ma'ale Adumim. Ma'ale Adumim is an Israeli settlement that its construction began in the 1970s, late 1970s. Today, there are 40,000 Israeli settlers living there. And for Israel and for settlements, it's quite big. It's the fourth or fifth biggest Israeli settlement in the West Bank. And basically, E1 is marked on the empty space between Ma'ale Adumim and Jerusalem. Okay, we can and we should think of it as the connection, the connecting part between the settlement and maybe the Green Line and West Jerusalem. Okay. Now, maybe I'll let you look at this as I'm speaking, and I'll soon stop to share the screen. But if we go back 30 years ago to the signing of the Oslo Accords, and today, 30 years later, it is, of course, we all know the Oslo Accords have terribly failed. There is today, maybe also from day one, there were voices critical of the Oslo agreements. But certainly today, the criticism has grown because of the failure. But assuming that the Oslo agreements were a sincere attempt for Israel and the Palestinian national movement to arrive at mutual recognition at an end of the occupation, and arriving at a situation of two states, Israel and Palestine, which recognize each other and have peace between them. For both Israelis and Palestinians, this promise of ending the conflict, ending the occupation, arriving at peace, we can believe it was very desirable for at least most people. It also something that comes with a price. Okay, you compromise, you give up maybe some of your what you view as your interests. One of the big prices for Israel would be to evacuate settlements. Okay, so on the one hand, I think all of us here on the Zoom can agree the settlements are illegal. They were not supposed to be constructed from the first place. If we accept the right of Palestinians for self-determination, then we accept probably that Palestinians have the right to say, okay, we don't want these settlements, they should go. But also, we can maybe look at it from Israeli eyes. This is a price. And those in Israel, and including the Israeli government that actually signed the Oslo agreements, those in Israel who supported the Oslo agreement and wanted an end to the conflict, there were differences in this peace camp regarding how to minimize the prices that Israel would pay. And this, of course, is something that is problematic, that can lead to obstacles, to problems. But going back to the example of, or to the issue of E1 and Ma'ale Adumim, Ma'ale Adumim in Israeli eyes is a settlement, but a very in the Israeli consensus, you can say. It is not considered a very, I don't know, ideological right-wing extreme settlement. It is very close to Jerusalem. And as I mentioned, it is quite big. So the Israeli government at the time said, let's try to have peace. Let's try to have an agreement with the Palestinians without evicting Ma'ale Adumim. Ma'ale Adumim will stay. And in order to guarantee this, let's seize the area between Ma'ale Adumim and Jerusalem and build a new settlement there and create a fact on the ground. Yeah, this is actually part of Israel. Okay, that was a plan. It's something that didn't happen, that didn't go forward, but this was an idea. And the 2 years on, in 1995, a Likud government comes into power, which is not happy with the Oslo agreement. In the year 2000, the second Intifada breaks, or basically, you can say both sides, the negotiations reached a deadlock. We can say what was the Israeli responsibility for it or the Palestinian responsibility for it. Doesn't matter. We can put the blame on whoever we want. But following that failure, the second Intifada broke out, and for the last 2.5 decades, it was mainly a right-wing government, we could say even extreme right-wing governments that were in power. And then the idea of E1, in those times, shifted. It changed from, okay, we want to end the occupation, but we want to define the terms, to actually we oppose a Palestinian state. We don't want it to happen, and we have the power to create facts on the ground that will make it very, very complicated or very difficult to establish a Palestinian state. And if I will share again the map in order to explain why E1, why that can be a result of E1. Okay. So let's imagine, for Palestinians and for the international community, the state of Palestine, or according to the Oslo agreements at least, the state of Palestine is supposed to be on the 1967 borders. Yeah, from the green line eastwards. Okay, and East Jerusalem will be the capital, and the West Bank is the rest of the Palestinian state, and of course the Gaza Strip. E1 is in the middle of that area. If it is built as an Israeli settlement, if it is controlled by Israel, along with Ma'ale Adomim, along with a few settlements here, it reaches deep into the West Bank, and it's right in the middle in terms of north and west. It's right in the middle of the West Bank. So basically, it is a way to break the West Bank into two parts, a northern part and a southern part. It's very, very difficult to think of a sustainable, viable, functioning Palestinian state this way. Okay, and of course, E1 is not the only settlement in the West Bank. So along with E1, Israel has been all those years building settlements, expanding settlements, establishing outposts with the very clear intent of breaking up, fragmenting the Palestinian space in the West Bank, expanding or enlarging the size of the settler population in the West Bank, in order to be able to say, look, this is undoable. There are hundreds of thousands of Israelis in the West Bank, settlers in the West Bank. By the way, today, their number is more than 700,000. So 250,000 Israelis live in East Jerusalem, okay, inside this gray line, and another 500,000 live in the rest of the West Bank. It's very difficult. It's in terms like, you know, the Israeli population is 10 million. So what it's 5% of or 7% of the Israeli population, something very difficult to imagine evicting all these settlers. On the other hand, if the settlements are not evicted, you don't really have a continuous viable Palestinian state. You can think of wherever each one of us is living. If outside our town, there would be some territory that is controlled by another country that can dictate things. Maybe there's also animosity and so on. How would our lives look, and how it would impact the functioning of our city, of our country, and so on. Okay, so E1 became a very important, very strategic goal for Israeli right-wing governments over the past 25 years. The international community understood this very well. Also, thanks to Palestinians speaking against it and explaining the meaning, thanks to human rights organizations like Amin speaking and explaining the impact. And it was very, very clear, although Israel gets away with many things which are illegal and which are unjust and which it should not be allowed to do, E1 is really something too much. And the international community for all these years was strong enough, was clear enough to give the message to Israeli governments, you cannot build this settlement. Okay, and actually, in order to build a settlement, you first need to approve a zoning plan. So even the approval of the zoning plan is the pressures on Israel by the international community, also by Palestinians and by inside the Israeli society, those in Israel who are against the occupation, were strong and efficient enough, effective enough that the approval of the zoning plan did not go forward. Okay? This is all the way up to 2023, 3 years ago, or almost 3 years ago, when the current government comes into power, is elected. This government explicitly puts annexation as a goal. And takes steps to actually advance it on the ground. Okay. Surprisingly enough, we didn't feel and it did take many steps and created many changes that have worsened the situation in the West Bank. This began from January 2023, so way before the Hamas attack on October 7th, 2023, and it has been continuing despite the crisis of the Hamas attack, of the Israeli retaliation and the destruction of Gaza since. This has been continuing in the West Bank at a very high pace. And surprisingly, we did not really see anything move forward in the E1 area, despite the fact that everyone was expecting it to happen, until 3 or 4 months ago, when suddenly the Israeli authorities, the relevant authority is a planning committee under the civil administration, which is the body of the Israeli army that is responsible for so-called civilian issues in the West Bank. So the planning committee announced that it is going to advance the zoning plan towards approval. Objections to the plan by Palestinian communities in the area, by Israeli human rights NGOs such as Amin, all these objections were rejected by the committee. And in September, the two first zoning plans in this area, okay, it's quite a big area, so you need quite a few zoning plans for all of it. The two first zoning plans were approved. Their scope is for construction of 3,400 housing units, and it's serious. It's bad enough, but also it's a signal to what is to follow. And Israeli senior politicians were not shy about the meaning of this approval. So, for example, Ministry of Finance, Bezalel Smotrich, who on the one hand is one of the most extreme ministers in this very extreme government, but also he has authorities on issues in the West Bank. He makes decisions on the West Bank. He declared, like, this is now truly the end of a possibility for a Palestinian state. The Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, came to Ma'ale Adumim after the approval of the plan and announced, we promised to prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state. And you see, we are keeping our promise. We approved E1. In practical terms, there is no settlement yet. The plan was approved. Okay. The next steps would be for the government to publish building tenders and for construction to begin. We cannot know in advance when this will happen, but can very well be that it will happen in the coming year. Okay, one, because as I explained, this is something that is a strategic goal for this government. Two, they want to take the political credit. Three, there's probably going to be elections in Israel in 2026. So the ministers, this government, will want to say, look, we're not only talking, we're not only approving plans, we're actually constructing the settlement. Okay. So going back to what I said earlier, regardless of the Israeli Knesset, the Israeli government declaring, yes, we have annexed the West Bank, or we are annexing an area around Jerusalem, or whatever ideas they have for annexation, even if they don't do that, the construction of a new big settlement in this area, maybe introducing another 100,000 Israeli settlers here, will create, without changing anything in the legal formal situation, will create a situation that, on the one hand, very close to Jerusalem, and on the other hand, reaching out deep into the West Bank, breaking the space between East Jerusalem here on the west, Ramallah in the north and Bethlehem in the south. So three of the most important Palestinian cities. In between them, we will have about 150,000 settlers, so 40,000 in Ma'ale Adumim, another 100,000 in E1, very much changing the demographic situation in the area, but more than that, the spatial situation. If today it is a Palestinian space, it will be broken into two parts that to move between them. Moving means, of course, people, but it also means economically. It means in terms of the functioning of the Palestinian Authority. It will be very much controlled by this Israeli presence, which is both settlers and army, and so on. Okay, so it is as bad as annexation, and we call it a de facto annexation, also understanding that it is very, very difficult to undo. The last part, before maybe I open it to your questions, is what does annexation mean? Because, you know, Israel has been controlling the West Bank for 57 years. It has been building settlements. It has practically been doing whatever it wants for 57 years. So what really will change? Okay, well, and the truth is that at this current period, which was true before October 7th, much worse since October 7th. Today, when Israel speaks of annexation, it doesn't only envision Israeli control, because it is already controlled by Israel, and the Palestinian Authority is very weak, and there are the obstacles to force Israel to agree to end its occupation and to the establishment of a Palestinian state are quite enormous. So Israel is thinking about more than control of the West Bank when it thinks of annexation. It basically thinks of how it can get rid of the Palestinian population there. Okay, so something very, very central in the Israeli settler movement, certainly, but generally speaking, the Israeli right is we want to control the land. Which land? As much as possible, probably for many, the land between the river and the sea. We want to control it, but we don't want the Palestinian population there. So if until and moves of expulsion are through of Palestinians are throughout Israeli history, of course, since 1948 and the Nakba. But also in the decades since, there are consecutive, and you can say even systematic, moves to expel the Palestinian population. And this is very much what is at stake when we look at E1. I mentioned small Bedouin communities which are living in the area of E1. The population is something around 3,000 Palestinians that are living in these communities. If it is going to be a settlement, of course, Israel will begin with uprooting these communities. Some communities were already uprooted even 20, 30 years ago from the E1 area. Some Israel tried to uproot and was stopped by the international community. The most famous one, well-known one, is Khan el-Ahmar, which you may have heard of. So I think for these people, for these roughly 15 small Bedouin communities with 3,000 Palestinians, the threat and the danger is most acute. But also for the nearby Palestinian communities, like Azariah here, or Azaim, or Anata, which are not in E1, and they are bigger than each. There's many tens of thousands of Palestinians living in them. If they now become adjacent to a big settlement that controls movement, that puts them, you can say, under all kinds of conditions of confinement, then the situation in these communities may also greatly deteriorate. Okay. So this is like what's at stake, and maybe it's a good place for me now to pause and to see if there are any questions, requests for additional things, information.
Yeah, thank you so much, Avi, for this really insightful presentation. I'm sure this really helped people visualize what is happening and what's going on. So I'll look through the chat. I see some questions here, so I'll just read them out to you, since there's some other comments in the chat that are not really related to questions. So there's seems to be two questions about the map. So the first one is, this map says 2022. I know Tess said that there's a more recent map. So I wonder if there's any recent developments from, let's say, 2024, 2025 that is important to note, or if there's anything that we should know about kind of more recent developments in the last 2 or 3 years since 2022. One person has a specific question about one of the neighborhoods in East Jerusalem, which is that in 2021 it was said that a highway was being built next to or close to Sheikh, and she just asked, are you aware of such a highway next to Sheikh, and if so, where is that highway located in the map, if that was actually a plan and if it was built. So yeah, those are the two questions about the map. And if anyone has any other questions about the map, we can maybe just ask it in the chat and I'll make sure to relay it. Oh, I think you're muted, Aviv. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so very good questions. I apologize about using 2022 map, but for our purposes, it is good. It shows in the E1 area. There haven't been significant changes. But I will mention two that are close to E1. One is a national park in East Jerusalem that was approved last year in the area which is adjacent to the E1 area. Okay, so a national park does not necessarily sound like a settlement or like something political. National parks are about heritage or environment and so on. They maybe even sound like things we can sympathize with and so on. Actually, in East Jerusalem, Israel uses, and in the West Bank, Israel uses national parks and nature reserves as a form of seizing Palestinian space, saying Palestinians cannot basically do their whatever they want. It's actually controlled by Israel for presumably benign or legitimate reasons, but we know this is not so. So here, adjacent to E1, Israeli authorities said, okay, we can block Palestinian construction, we can seize Palestinian private land, not through making a new settlement and receiving all the criticism, but we'll call it a national park. And likewise, the issue of the roads. So the idea of building E1, of greatly increasing the settler population, there are all kinds of challenges for Israel, even if it does happen. For example, the settlers in the Jerusalem area usually work in Jerusalem. Okay, Jerusalem is the main city, and there is a daily commute between the settlements and Jerusalem. If you increase the amount of settlers threefold, how you also need to adapt or upgrade the infrastructure, for example, the road infrastructure. So yes, a new highway leading between Jerusalem and Ma'ale Adumim was constructed, or sorry, it was improved, it was upgraded to allow more traffic. It's beyond the Green Line, it's in occupied territory, but it will serve Israelis, settlers, not Palestinians, because Palestinians from the West Bank cannot enter East Jerusalem. There is another important road project, which I'll try to mention very briefly, that is actually, it's not built yet, it is supposed to be constructed, and it is supposed to serve Palestinian traffic to somehow bypass the E1 area, because as we saw in the map, E1 is smack in the middle of this Palestinian space. So if it is constructed, how can Palestinians move from north to south? The Israeli government says, don't worry, we're going to build a new modern highway with tunnels and so on. So Palestinians will be able to bypass E1, and it's going to work, and don't worry about it. And it's very telling, because if you just look at the highway, this planned highway, maybe you will agree that it is an improvement in comparison to existing highways. But if you understand that this is a step to allow Israel to build the new settlement in E1 and to kill any possibility for a Palestinian state, then you understand really what it's about.
Thank you, Aviv. There's a question about the Mal Adumim settlement. If it's under Israeli civilian law, I'm assuming, but is it largely perceived by mainstream Jewish Israelis as separate and different from West Jerusalem? And maybe we can expand this question also to just settlements in East Jerusalem, how it's perceived, by mainstream Jewish Israelis.
Sure. So that's an excellent question. I'll bring back the map, and let's start not from about Ma'ale Adumim, but about, as you said, the Israeli settlements in Jerusalem. So the blue patches that we see in the map here, they are inside the blue line, so they are in Jerusalem. They're blue because Israel built them since 1967 for Israelis. Okay. So, for example, here in the south, we see Gilo or Har Homa, and there's about 10 or a dozen in the north, Pisgat Ze'ev, and so on. Today, there are about 250,000 Israelis living in these residential areas. And how should we call the residential areas and the people who are living them? So for Palestinians and by international law, the Israeli annexation does not really change anything, okay? It's occupied territory. Israeli construction there is illegal. These are settlements. The residents in these areas are therefore settlers. And these are all Israeli unilateral steps imposed by Israel as an occupying power. They're not legitimate, they're not legal, and so on. From the Israeli perspective is very different. Okay, in 1967, the Israeli public took the annexation of Jerusalem. They took it for granted. Okay, I'll say everyone, but when I say everyone, it means I'm speaking about Jews in Israel. I'm not speaking about the Palestinian citizens of Israel. And I'm also not speaking about a small Jewish minority that opposed Jewish supremacy, certainly from 1967, but also from before 1967. But practically all Jews in Israel in 1967 were euphoric about the military victory. And Jerusalem is not just any place, yeah. Jerusalem, the old city, central to Jewish religion, central to Jewish national feeling and sentiment. So of course, if we won, and of course the war is not our fault, the war is the other side's fault, the Arabs' fault. So we won, this is ours, and certainly the old city. So the Israeli government decision to annex East Jerusalem had a huge impact on Israeli perspectives, that this is not occupied territory. This is part of the state of Israel. Even Israeli, the Israeli left, which speaks about occupation and speaks about settlements and is of course opposed to them, does not use those terms when it speaks about East Jerusalem. Okay, they will not say, they will say occupation in the West Bank. They usually will not say occupation in East Jerusalem. And the people that are the settlers, the people who are living in these settlements, they will be very surprised to hear that they are considered as settlers. They are not there for ideological reasons. They maybe do not even know where the green line is and do not know the difference between an Israeli settlement in Jerusalem and an Israeli neighborhood inside the green line. Regardless of who is right and who is wrong, and according to international law, it is very clear who is right and who is wrong. But regardless of that, the perspectives here are very, very different. So that's for the part of how do Israelis perceive the settlements in Jerusalem. Regarding Ma'ale Adumim, it is very difficult for Israelis to claim that Ma'ale Adumim is not a settlement, okay? Unlike what I said regarding Jerusalem. But it is so close to Jerusalem. Many of its residents are people who grew up in Jerusalem, were born in Jerusalem, and then moved to the settlement because, I don't know, cheaper housing and so on. They take their presence for granted. It's not that they of course do not want to be evicted, but maybe even the thought does not cross their minds. So they know that they live in a settlement, but it doesn't feel maybe substantial to them, and they also expect, if this government is a right-wing government and it's going to do annexation, they accept that they expect to be the first who come under to that the annexation includes them.
Thanks, Aviv. There's a lot of questions here. So I think there's one, I think it's a good question just in general. As a civil society organization, especially working like as an Israeli civil society organization, how free are you to report or go where you want? And have you received more level of pushback, especially from the government or other Israelis, especially since October 2023? Has that been a little bit more difficult for you to kind of report or do work?
Right. Thank you for this question. So I don't know, the backlash or the attacks on Israeli human rights organizations and anti-occupation organizations is not new. It has been like orchestrated campaigns have been for the last 2 decades. There were also political assassinations of left-wing demonstrators and so on, even 40 years ago. I think what is new in the last decade or so is that apart from not only right-wing campaigns from all kinds of right-wing organizations, but also legislation and government action against human rights organizations. For example, there is legislation sanctioning Israeli, not Israeli organizations, but Israeli formal bodies like municipalities and so on, if they commemorate the Nakba, okay, the uprooting of Palestinians in 1948. There is legislation, or there were attempts at legislation, repeated attempts at legislation to tax funding for human rights organizations. So far, these were not legislated, but it's one of the central aims of this government. We are very concerned that it will happen. There is legislation that limits our ability to act in terms we have to announce. If I want to approach an official, the first thing I have to do is to say I receive funding from European, or I work for an organization that receives funding from European governments and so on. So yes, there have been smear campaigns and so on. I am very happy to say, proud to say that Amin, along with other human rights organizations, these threats have not deterred us. We have not looked at ways to how we can make our messages more moderate or more suitable to the Israeli ear. We voice our criticism, and we explain what we think is being done in, I think, the most clear way.
Wonderful. There's more questions, but I'll try to take a few more. I see some in the chat. One maybe expanding a little bit. I know you talked a little bit about the settlements in East Jerusalem, kind of the situation there and the perception there. But I'm curious, kind of, because there's in Sheikh Jarrah and so on. There's been ongoing displacement. Actually, more recently, I think on Sunday, 19 Palestinians from two families were displaced. So, in terms of the geography of where most of the right-wing activity is coming from, and settlement activity, are there specific locations or communities located in Jerusalem, like Israeli communities, that are the primary perpetrators of this? So yeah, I'm just curious in terms of the political affiliations, perhaps.
Right. So you bring up a whole new and very important issue that I didn't mention at all. Those big blue patches of the settlements, these are formal government projects, government decisions, the construction is by the government, and so on, on land that was expropriated from Palestinians, okay? But for the most part, it was unbuilt land. So it was Palestinian property, but it's not that Palestinians were living there, okay? Palestinians lost their lands, but they did not lose their homes for these settlements. And these settlements do not necessarily infringe on the community itself. Okay, the settlement is located outside of the Palestinian community. So it's not as destructive. The settlers in the settlements that you mentioned, Nathan, for example, I'll try. Let's see if we see it here. It's not really marked in this map, but here is Sheikh Jarrah, which you mentioned, to the north of the old city, very close, and to the south of the old city, Silwan. So these are two examples of Palestinian neighborhoods. Sheikh Jarrah is maybe 5,000 Palestinians are living there. Silwan is much bigger, 30,000 Palestinians, which Israeli settlers, assisted by the Israeli government, have made it a point, have targeted to seize Palestinian homes in these neighborhoods, evict the families who are living in these homes, and give them to the hands of settlers, which will live inside the Palestinian neighborhood, the Palestinian community. Today, there are about 2,000 or 3,000 Israeli settlers in these neighborhoods in the old city or around the old city. They are, unlike the settlers that I mentioned before, they are very ideological, and they very hostile to Palestinians, to Palestinian presence. They are armed. And of course, their presence in the midst of Palestinian communities, tens of thousands of people living in these communities, is very, very destructive, brings a lot of violence, violates many aspects of the rights of the people and of the communities. So if you're asking what are the central ones, the heart of the issue is the old city. So the Muslim quarter in the old city, and also targeting the Al-Aqsa compound, the Temple Mount, which is a whole other important issue, and then around the old city. Sheikh Jarrah, Silwan, which you mentioned, and also the Mount of Olives with neighborhoods of Wad al-Jawz and Atur and Ras Salam.
Thank you so much for that explanation. So there's 3 questions from someone. One of them I think a lot of people have asked, so we can kind of maybe end the session with that actually. The first one is Iramim working with other groups in Israel, Rabbis for Human Rights, for example, and what does maybe the projects or collaborative projects look like? So maybe that's the first question you can answer.
Sure. So yes, of course, we have to work together, and we have how should I say joint campaigns, joint efforts, either of advocacy or activism or legal appeals and so on, with a variety of organizations. Actually, not necessarily rabbis for human rights, but certainly Peace Now, BIMCOM, which is planning human rights in the aspect of planning rights. Also with grassroots groups in Jerusalem that are very, how do you say, very effective in terms of solidarity action. And I think what is very important for us is the solidarity and the joint efforts with Palestinian communities in Jerusalem. So when we work against settler projects in Silwan, for example, we do it with the people that live in Silwan. And we have now submitted an appeal against the approval of the E1 plan. Of course, we are speaking with and coordinating with some of the Palestinian communities in the area.
And the last question, which is related, it's 2 questions that are related, but the first one, this is kind of about action and advocacy. How can people from North America, Europe, internationally do something meaningful in this specific issue? And then relatedly, how effective is like a BDS campaign in regards to the E1 plan? Like, is there any, because I know BDS is a very general, it's more of a general widespread thing, but I don't know how effective it might be in regards to a specific issue of Jerusalem settlements and settlement expansion. So I'm curious kind of what your answer is on that.
Sure. So I just mentioned that we submitted an appeal against the approval of the E1 plan to the court. We did it because E1 is such a disastrous plan and we have to do anything we can against it. Not because we have faith that the Israeli courts will give protection to Palestinian rights or to the possibility of a future Palestinian state. So it's not that we have much hopes for this appeal. And today, we very much understand that the only way to prevent the settlement from materializing is through pressuring the Israeli government, Israeli authorities, telling them that, or not telling them, but that so that they understand that there will be a very serious price to actually construct this settlement. Unfortunately, the ability to create pressure from within Israeli society on this issue is very diminished these days. So it has to be international pressure. And for me, at least, the message in a nutshell is, one, you must not be allowed to do this. If you do this, then you have to understand that you will pay this price, this price, this price, which it's not only about words, that we will condemn you, that we will say you're doing the wrong thing, but actually, yeah, it has to be things of consequence. And the second thing is Israel cannot continue this eternal apartheid, expanding it, advancing it, making it worse, and continue to be called a democracy. So for people people like yourselves telling your representatives, your governments, look, you must prevent it. But if you don't prevent it, then you cannot continue to consider Israel as a democratic state. It has to be considered as a very, very different and oppressive regime. Now, regarding BDS, so going back to the previous question about how human rights organizations are being attacked, there is legislation today in Israel which prevents me from speaking about BDS and sanctions against Israel. Okay, so I cannot tell you my opinion about it. I cannot say what I think is right, what I think is wrong. But certainly, if you think that this is a way, it's very good to think about how to make it effective.
Is there any other ways that we can support Amin's work, more generally, any other projects or programs that you're planning or have that people can kind of learn more or share about?
Right. So I think at the beginning of the session, someone asked in the chat about our website. So it's really brand new. I mean, we have had a website, but a new version, English version, has just come up. So as far as you want to continue and be updated or learn about Jerusalem issues, as Tess said in the beginning, this is one of our main goals, missions. And please use our website. Our projects or actions center around, of course, prevention of settlements and the annexation, and the mirror image of that, protecting Palestinian housing rights, planning rights, and so on. Other issues have to do with services for Palestinians in Jerusalem, for example, construction of schools, where there's a huge shortage of schools in East Jerusalem, police violence, the holy places, especially the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And in all these issues, our work combines advocacy, outreach to the public, activism, sometimes also legal action. In terms of advocacy, Tess said it, I think, very clearly in the beginning. As much as you can join our efforts, campaigning together or spreading our message, or also showing us that you support us. These are all very, very important, both morally for us and in terms of impact and effect. Our work, of course, requires funding. And if and when you want to support in that way, it's also very, very welcome. And we're just starting in a couple of weeks a fundraising campaign. But I think the most important is stay in touch with us through our newsletter. And then you're up to date and you hear what we're doing. And maybe you also get your own ideas. I can support this, or I want to be involved in that. Tess, is there something you want to add on that?
Actually, Aviv, I think you said it better than I could. Yeah, I'll just repeat. Please sign up for our newsletter if you're interested in staying up to date. You can find the sign up form on our website.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I just shared the link, hopefully, to the new website. It's just immune.org, I believe. And
Yeah.
people can sign up for the newsletter there. I know some people asked if there's like upcoming events, so that we can see, I'm assuming, on the newsletter.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So yeah,
Yeah.
I know there are a few questions about trying to spread the word of Immune events and programs, so you can do that. And then in regards to fundraising, you guys have a donation page. Do you guys have a U.S. fiscal sponsor? Is there like, or is it pretty simple to to donate if people are interested in donating?
I believe it should be pretty straightforward through the website. But if anyone encounters issues, you can let me know and I will look into it.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for Tess and Aviv for just sharing with us and taking the time today to explain to us this information. And I hope it was really helpful for the audience. The map was really great, so I'll make sure also to I think Tess put like maybe a link to the maps already or the archive of the maps, so
Mhm.
you can access that somewhere in the chat if you're interested. But yeah, I just want to thank you again, and I hope that your work continues, and that you get results and continue to get results.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much.